Welcome to the BLTnT podcast. I'm your host, Matt Loria, serving up real stories of business, life, technology, and transformations. You'll hear from interesting people about big changes from career shifts to life-altering decisions and the innovations that help make it all happen. It's about sharing those light bulb moments, pivot points, challenges overcome, and the journeys that inspire us to think differently. If you're on the lookout for insights to propel you forward, stories that resonate, or just a bit of inspiration on your next BLTnT move, you're in the right place. Let's dig in. I'm here with Ingmar Korstanje, President, CEO? President, Marlo Beauty Supply. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
This is our inaugural video podcast for the BLTnT podcast. So thanks for being our first victim.
No pressure.
None at all. You look great on camera. You know, guys without hair always do, I've been told. So
yeah, it's saying something for coming from a guy in the beauty supply industry.
That's always an interesting thing. What do you always tell me about it?
The first ingredient is water, and the second ingredient is marketing.
No, I meant your comment about no hair is safe.
Oh, right. That's true.
So, hey, can you tell us a little bit about what Marlo Beauty Supply does?
Yeah, I always tell people we're kind of like the hardware store to the trade. And as a distributor brand, we're very similar to, I'd say, Costco/Ace Hardware.
Okay.
Where, you know, when you walk into Costco, you know what you're going in for, and then you walk out with an extra pallet of something you didn't see coming. And then when you go to Ace Hardware, there's always, right, they have what you need. They've got helpful people there, and it's a nice antithesis maybe against Home Depot or Lowe's.
Gotcha. So you serve people that own salons, right? Chains of salons as well?
Yep. Probably the biggest differentiator with us as compared to some others that are in the industry is that we do only sell to the licensed trade. So that's going to be a licensed cosmetologist, which can mean hair, nails, skin, and spa. And we do require a registration with the active cosmetology license number in order to be able to access our corporate website.
And that's anywhere in the United States or globally, or where do you ship to?
We do ship to all 48 states. We have a couple of customers in Alaska and Hawaii, and then we do have some export accounts, but it's primarily the business is focused in the U.S., mainly from a logistics reason.
Okay. And when you and I first met, you had kind of a campus over in Ferndale, Michigan, with a couple of different buildings, and now you have built a much larger distribution center. Can you talk about kind of your footprint, the why behind all that?
Yeah, we were in a position back in 2007 where we actually divested a good portion of our business. So we were in one location at the time in Ferndale, which we had been in since 1994. And then we added a second location next door about 2014 due to growth. And then around 2021, we added another location around the corner, which is a content creation studio. So that was kind of the makeup of our campus. And it served us really well during the time of 2007 to 2020. But then we were really fortunate to be e-com ready when COVID hit. And so our business grew pretty significantly in the span of about 12 months. So we were completely whacked out of space. But being in Metro Detroit, as we all know, when things are decent to better or good with automotive tends to take everything. Mm-hmm. So from space to good talent to transportation, et cetera. So it was a really arduous process to find new space, but we were fortunate as interest rates started to trickle up a little bit, local and national developers got a lot more accommodating to support smaller footprint distribution centers.
Okay, great. And what is this distribution center in square footage?
60,000.
Okay.
Which is great for a lot of small products.
Awesome. And you went ahead and, ever since I've known you, you've always been a tech-forward sort of guy. So you've early on invested in ERP, warehouse management systems, higher-end infrastructure. Did the same at the new facility as well?
Yeah, I tell everybody, especially at our company, that everything with regards to the move from the space to the hardware investments to the racking and IT, everything was done in the spirit of the run to 2030 and 2035. So I would say our IT footprint in Warren our new facility in Warren was probably our largest investment out of anything that we made. But it's in the same spirit of the fact that at the end of the day, even though we're a distributor, we're truly an e-commerce company that happens to distribute beauty supplies.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've got to have that tech backbone in order to support that.
When we first met, I remember, I don't even think you explained your company as a beauty supply company. You said, I'm in e-commerce when we met, because we met through some common friends.
Mm-hmm.
And that first introduction was, I'm Ingmar and I'm in e-commerce.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what we've really tried to strive to do is build out a platform for distribution, whether that's in beauty supplies or it could eventually be in other verticals as well. And so that it's kind of going back to the design of the facility in Warren. We needed the space, we needed the room to grow, and so along with that, we needed the IT backbone to support us.
Okay, great. On the system side of things, though, so I recall that a few years back you were running on a platform, was working decent for you, but then you decided to go out and have a whole custom-made software system application to run the organization.
Yeah, it's I think so many other folks running small, medium-sized businesses, I'm sure yourself and other friends that we know that we've gotten to know through our network, is you've got to be constantly inquisitive when it comes to IT and you're planning for it. And so the system that runs MarloBeauty.com now, for all intents and purposes, is a custom-built e-com platform, of which the code we sourced from a large kitchen and restaurant distributor out of California. And it was interesting as we were going through the homework to figure out if this was going to work. And speaking to that company and their CIO and head of e-commerce, selling to a restaurant manager, chef, or restaurant owner, it's not a whole lot different than selling to a salon owner, stylist, or nail tech in terms of how they order. And so it was really interesting going through that conversation with R.W. Smith that kind of the light bulb went off. And so we purchased a copy of their code with exclusive distribution rights for the beauty supply industry.
Interesting.
So restaurants, salons, it's close enough.
Yeah, right. I would have never thought that. But most people have hair and everybody eats. So
right.
I guess there's that.
We got that going for us.
Let's back up. You got into this business after meeting your what would be your future wife, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Can you tell us this story? Because this is a kind of an interesting family business, divestiture, M&A sort of story. You've got a really cool story.
It's a pretty long marathon, but it all started in 1990 as Marlo and I met at Michigan State University as undergrads. And then we both went to Chicago and then coincidentally both worked in logistics and transportation there for a number of years. And then we were in business school, and it was right at the advent of e-commerce starting. And obviously, we'd been together for a number of years by that time and got married in 1998. And in speaking a lot of times as my in-laws would come out to visit us out in Arizona quite a bit, e-commerce and distribution were getting closer and closer to reality from a business standpoint. And I grew up next to two entrepreneurs, and I was always taken aback by their hard work, but also a lot of the freedom that they had in terms of their decision making. Mm-hmm. So I grew up in a Fortune 500 family, and I think maybe in the late 90s that wasn't quite what it was all cracked up to be. I'm not sure that it is today either, but and I was probably a little bright-eyed and bushy-tailed at the same time, but I didn't see that my father-in-law really had much of a succession plan because none of the kids were truly in the business at the time. And so him and I had the initial conversation about, potentially coming to work with him. And when we came back in 2000, we immediately took Marlo Beauty to MarloBeauty.com. And within about 12 months, we were the fastest puller of product out of his distribution center. So, today Mike can find the power button on his desktop. But back in 2000, I'm not so sure. But if there was one thing that he understood was the power of sales and throughput. So by 2001, he got pretty curious as to what we were up to.
Sure. So at that time, he had retail storefronts as well, correct?
Yep. So Mike started his career in the health and beauty business with Johnson & Johnson. And somewhere along the way saw the niche of being in the salon and beauty supply business. and started off right out of the gate with 3 stores, and over time grew that to 14 locations. And so he was really the value-based beauty supply distributor for the salons in the Metro Detroit area from 1981 into the early 2000s.
Okay. And then what was the impetus to divest of the stores?
There was a big roll-up of family-owned distributors that was happening in the industry, which happened with so many distribution businesses, regardless of category, starting in the 2000s. And we were competing against publicly traded Sally Beauty Supply, and they were making it pretty evident that we were the last lone holdout during that roll-up, and they were making it a little uncomfortable. And so from a strategic perspective, I was looking at it saying, hey, right, we were growing quickly on the national e-commerce side of things, but we were in a bit of a foxhole here in Detroit. And to Sally's credit, they were always very fair when they bought distributors in a specific market. They didn't overpay, but they didn't underpay. And we'd always had a very good relationship with the leadership at Sally's, and so I would say I probably brokered the sale between the CEO of Sally's and my father-in-law because they were pretty friendly, so I think they had a hard time negotiating with each other.
Okay.
So I got them within a range, and then over a couple conference calls and a turkey sandwich, we came to an agreement and they really did want Detroit to themselves, and we really wanted to go 100% e-com. And so at the closing, which we did over the phone, their head counsel actually said, he's like, we've probably purchased 50 or 60 companies in our time at Sally's, and they said this has by far been the most pleasant acquisition we've ever done.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was super cool because everybody got what they wanted to a large extent, and so after that, it was just good, smart business.
Interesting. And when did you feel like you had to nudge Mike along? I mean, that had to be pretty uncomfortable for him to have a model that he had been used to for all those years, and then to just say, okay, here's my son-in-law who's got this idea.
Yeah, it definitely took some guts, but I think he believed in our collective vision, and it wasn't like we were starting from scratch. We had a bit of an engine going, and so I think at the same time, going back to what he noticed in 2001 was that he understood sales, which as a distributor, that's pretty much your day job.
Sure.
And the writing was on the wall that with the distributor roll-up that was happening, it was going to be hard to sustain, to be a good local supplier up against a national distributor with, immense buying power. But at the same time, I give him a lot of credit because the stores really were his baby, if you will. But one of our lines that we just would not cross was what was going to happen with all our team members at our store locations. Every single one of them had the opportunity to continue their career with Sally's. Even if they were going to close locations, they were given opportunities to remain with Sally's and other store locations, which was super important to us.
Interesting. It's funny. I was actually just going to jump into kind of family life and talking about working with your wife and father-in-law a little, kind of a little bit deeper. But let's push off on that and kind of keep going with what you're talking about, which is your commitment to employees. Mind if I tell a little story about the introduction that I made for you? So, must have been a few months ago, or maybe 6 months ago at this point in time. I had come across a young man who needed employment, kind of restarting life, if you will, had a criminal record. So I called a few people, Ingmar being one of them, and I said, do you hire people with criminal backgrounds? And Ingmar said, yeah, we're a second chance organization. So you ended up hiring the guy. It ultimately didn't end up working out, from my understanding, but the chance that you gave him and the chance and what you told me about some of your other employees that you've given these opportunities to really stood out to me in a number of ways. So can you talk about why you do that, talk about some of the ways that you manage that, and what's the why behind it for you?
Yeah, I think I have to give Mike a lot of credit too, my father-in-law, because when I got into the business in 2000, I noticed that he had an immense amount of empathy for his employees and the team members that came in. And I always noticed that for the most part, he worked for them. He would do his rounds to all the store locations, and he would come back to the distribution center just exhausted because he'd just gotten scolded for everything he needed to go back to headquarters and fix.
Wow.
But I always, that left a big effect on me in terms of, the way that he built the company with the team that he had. And along the way, we had some people that had come into the business, maybe that had a few missteps earlier in life that, they needed a second chance from an employment perspective. And that left a big effect on me. And so, all those people that were in that situation when I joined the company are still with us today. Wow. So 23, 24 years later, had you closed the door on those people, from a hiring perspective, they're some of our most valuable operational team members at this point. So, when you called, I didn't even flinch. Like, yeah, heck yeah, right? You've got to give people an opportunity, and obviously there are different levels of backgrounds. If you took one misstep and that's one thing. If went off a cliff, that's another.
Sure.
So there's limits to it, but obviously, especially with a lot of younger people, I think in today's world, you've got to be open-minded, and that's just from what I've seen from the experience that we've had from some of our long-term team members.
Sure. You've carried that torch too. I mean, essentially, I feel like what you're saying is servant leadership is really in the DNA of Marlo, having started with Mike and then being carried on through you. But the other interesting thing about you is that you're dressed quite nice today in comparison to some of the ways that I sometimes see you, because you have no problem going from the boardroom to the warehouse. There's days I see you with a do-rag on and, up at 4 a.m, kind of no nonsense sort of person. I think your people have a huge respect for you because you are out there sweating alongside of them.
Yeah, for sure. I think probably the outside of my neighbors I grew up next to, because I could remember getting up in the morning and seeing their cars already leaving, and it was before 6. So they always left a big impact on me. And then the gentleman who owned the first company I worked for out of Michigan State was a freight brokerage company in Chicago that's become world famous from a workplace perspective. And you could not beat Paul Loeb into the office. Mm-hmm. Just couldn't. And he lived an hour away. So, and we tried. We started at 7, and so sometimes we would try to get there at 6. He was there. You'd get there at 5:30. He was there. You get there at 5. He was there.
Wow.
And so, and it's still with all of us alumni from that company. Whenever we see each other, we always talk about that and the work ethic that he imparted on us. And so, I think it kind of sets the tone if you're in an operations-heavy industry or mm-hmm. business. If you're expecting your team to hustle and grind an 8 to 10 hour shift, it's just my own personal philosophy. You better be the first one in the door.
Good stuff. You also go to bed early.
I do.
To make sure you can get up early.
Yep. That was really came out of when COVID hit. It came at us so fast. According to the state laws of Michigan, we shut down our business, and I shop vac the warehouse about 3 times. Then I kind of got mad. I was like, everything that we've done since 2008 to today, right? We've broken our back building this business, and we were very, very in tune with our customer base. Mm-hmm. We know that our customer is short on inventory for good reason, right? Because inventory is money. And we know that there's an immense amount of independent beauty professionals out there that do services at home or in a salon suite, what have you. And at the time, the main competitors, the large national distributors, were very brick and mortar based. Mm. And so we knew that the salon and spa professionals were going to have a troubling time getting access to inventory. So we turned the business back on after, of course, getting the green light from our attorneys that we were necessary. We service a couple parts of the industry that were deemed as necessary. So we went back to work, and as soon as we did, we really quickly picked up on the fact that there was a tidal wave coming at us. And so for April 2020 to about August 2020, we were going 7 days a week, up at 4, going to bed at 9 p.m. and just went. I think we had 2 28-day stints where we worked every day.
Wow.
And so, yeah, when you're going at that pace, you have no choice, but you have to go to bed early.
Sure.
And ever since then, it's kind of stuck with me.
That's great.
So
That's great. And so, no, just like, was it Paul? Nobody's beating you to the office?
yeah, no, for the most part. And now there's a bit of a morning crew. We call it the Breakfast Club. I'm usually the first one there. To the point where if I'm not, usually I'll get a text from one of the fellows like, "Hey, is everything
okay?
all right?" And then Charlie, Trissell, and Steve show up at 6. Monique shows up about 6:20.
Wow.
So breakfast is around 6:30.
Great.
And it's fun. We always chat a little bit about shop and chat what's coming at us for the day or what's happening in sports and family. And then, once the shift starts at 7, everybody just hits the ground running.
Sure. That's great. This episode of the BLTnT podcast is sponsored by Auxium, business IT and cybersecurity designed to outsmart chaos. And powered by Juniper Networks. Automate your network with Juniper Networks and the Mist AI platform, the world's first AI-driven wired and wireless network. You kind of touched on the subject of really knowing your customer. In your business, you do get to focus on kind of one customer type, essentially, right? And for the most part, that customer, what you had just said was that customer doesn't have a lot of money to keep a lot of inventory typically, and that makes a lot of sense of why more of a just-in-time or close to just-in-time sort of readiness from your perspective is essential to serve them.
Yeah, for sure. Even though we're based obviously here in Metro Detroit, we're always taken aback by the amount of business that we're acquiring in states like California, Texas, Florida, even Washington State. And I think that has to do a little bit more with the fact that the big national distributors still are pretty brick and mortar based. And for us, and that goes back to how Marlo and I started our careers, being in logistics and in transportation, is you've got to know, the logistics needs of your customer. So for us, it's almost secondary to what's going in the box that's getting shipped out. I say we nerd out over corrugated and tape labels and strength of tape and the strength of boxes, because we've got one chance every time that our customer orders to re-impress her. And I say her because 95% of our customers are women, which I also think is fantastic. And they're in business for themselves. So if they're entrusting us to help them run their business, it doesn't get any more personal than that, at least not to me.
Sure.
And I strive to communicate that to our entire team. And I think it goes back to, the kind of the culture at Marlo's is every team member is in business for themselves. Whether you're an order picker, whether you're on the digital team, whether you're in our professional customer care team, we're trying to set it up in such a way where every group within the business and every individual in the business has a very special part in making sure that customer is going to get that order after she places it, because she's got 10, 12, 15 services coming up this week or this weekend, and she's going to use those supplies. So everything's got to go perfect.
Wow. I've got a little bit of experience, not myself going to any salons, but my wife goes to our niece who owns her own salon, and it's a 2-person salon set inside of a larger building with many suites,
Yep.
right? With many suites. So that's one little view I have into into that world of beauty. Has that been a big change for you to see these smaller facilities pop up, or large footprint, multiple business owners with inside of them? Has that changed your business at all?
Yeah, I actually think it's been a huge asset to us as well, because they're all independents, and there's about 4 or 5 leading national salon and spa suite brands that are out there. And we do quite a bit of business with customers that are in all those brands. And so for us as well, it's also great for customer acquisition, simply because in a typical suite, there's 20 to 25 individual suites with either an individual operator or, in the case of your niece, where there's 2 people in a suite. And so anytime that one of our boxes, which has the Marlo logo emblazoned on the side, shows up in that in that foyer or in the inventory control room, there's just another opportunity that another 20 tenants are going to see our box and be inquisitive as to who we might be.
Sure.
But yeah, the suites really came on about a decade ago, and it's become a very important part of the business. And it's great. It's great for an option for a stylist or a professional who has a great book of business that wants to be a little bit more self-employed and standing on their own 2 feet. And that being said, there's still, you go all around anywhere in Metro Detroit, you see, thousands and thousands of salons. So it's just nice that if you want to be in the salon for the camaraderie and the continued training that a salon can offer, that's great. But if you're also in a position to open up your own shop and go into a suite, that's now that business model is there, it's also available for that customer.
Great. So you kind of just told me, that's been the last 10 years that model has been kind of out there. What are you seeing for the next 5 to 10 years, or as you talked about, 2030 to 2035? Where's your industry going?
Well, it's like we were talking about before we got started, when we look at categories like restaurants and salons, right? They're necessities at this point in the United States, and so they're going to exist. And I think that because of the massive roll-up of family-owned distributors that occurred from, I'd say, around 2005 to 2015, it's created 3 large national mega distributors, and they're good competitors and are run by good people, but they're big, right? And typically, anytime you have a roll-up of distribution in any industry, that creates a vacuum for service. And that's really what we've picked up on is focusing on every customer that places an order as a small business owner. Mm-hmm. And if we continue just to service her needs, whether it's with a credit on an order, if it's a return because something got damaged, it's filing a claim with UPS on her behalf, doing all the little things that will support her irregardless if she's in a suite, in a salon, has a chair in her basement or garage. It's making sure that we stay focused on that tradesperson's needs from a service perspective, and irrespective of what location it is that they choose to work in. And I think for the most part over the next 5 to 10 years, that's going to hold true.
Great. So let's go back to the whole family recipe here. So,
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting that son-in-law comes along and ends up essentially running the business of your father-in-law, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
But Marlo works in the business with you, your wife,
Mm-hmm.
who the namesake of the organization.
Right.
So does she ever remind you of that?
Yeah, from time to time.
Okay. She doesn't have to. It's right on the building.
Right.
And then you have a son.
Correct.
How old is your son?
He's 19.
Okay. And what's he doing right now?
He's a freshman at McGill University in Montreal.
Okay. And any interest on his part right now that he's showing towards the family business?
I don't know, to be honest. We've never had that conversation. I think you got to give any generation their own path and their own timeline. Mm-hmm. I think it could be a conversation at some point as our son gets out of college and starts his career somewhere else. But I think that's super important for any family business, is to go out and earn your paycheck first on your own and see what the world is like. But he's got a lot of interests, and he's majoring in geography and geographic systems. He's fascinated with transit systems.
Wow.
I don't know. I don't know that beauty supplies is in his future, but you never know.
Okay.
So
let's talk about those. So how has being in a family business weighed on in the positives and negatives with you, with your relationship with Mike, especially with your relationship with Marlo and the fact that you guys work together?
Yeah, I think the key is you absolutely have to keep nepotism at bay, and that can be in many different forms. But for the most part, I think we've handled it extremely well. Working with Marlo is as easy as it comes because she's a lot brighter than I am. Graduated at the top of her class at Michigan State and in the supply chain program. In transportation and distribution and the focus of supply chain. So us running a distributorship together isn't too much of a stretch. So I do think that we really are a two-person leadership team in that aspect. And I would say it's very conducive for our relationship. There's times when we both know when it's time not to talk work. If we're going on a Sunday walk or if we're traveling and it's not for work, we kind of find that ebb and flow. But at the same time, we are really running two separate businesses within Marlo Beauty Supply. I'm focused primarily on sales, operation, and finance, and Marlo runs our digital team. And being 85% e-commerce, her and her team just do an amazing job at finding us new customers. And so it's really two separate businesses where I'm, for all intents and purposes, running almost a third-party logistics operation, and she's running a quasi-digital agency. And so we really need each other for both of us to succeed. And we see that in supporting each other and supporting each other's teams. And then, I think as I've seen with so many family operations, and most of my friends are entrepreneurs or in family businesses. I think it's just because you have so much more in common.
Sure.
With some of the challenges you face on a daily, weekly basis. And there's different schools of thought in terms of generational handover in terms of the business. And I think there was a prevailing thought for a long time that, the next generation should force out the older generation. And myself and my close friends that are all in family businesses, we think completely counter to that. I had lunch with Mike out in the conference table in the distribution center on Friday. And, he's been in business for 50 years for himself. Like, that's invaluable
Sure.
to someone in our position to have that as available as counsel.
Absolutely.
And so I actually had an idea that I wanted to pitch him on. And he, I don't know how old my father-in-law is. I think he's 83 or 84, and still completely sharp. And had loved where I was headed, but had some asterisks that he said, well, make sure you think about these things. Mm-hmm. Then you finish your sandwich and hit the road. So that's a pretty good gig.
That's great.
Right.
So he's actively in the building. How would you say his involvement is with the business overall?
Well, when we moved the business last year, I think he was kind of a man without a home for a little bit because we were so focused and stressed on getting the move out of the way. But we're redoing the offices in our former building, and so where Marlo and the digital team will be based out of, along with the content creation studio. I think he enjoys being in Ferndale more than coming into South Warren.
Sure.
And so Mike, when we had before the move, he loved coming to work, and we loved having him there. Right, you could always go pick his brain, and he always said, like, if I'm in the way, you let me know. We said, well, we will, but it's you also have to keep an open mind. I think with this generation of business owners, and I'd be curious to get your take on it too, not only with yourself but with other clients from Oxium. People don't necessarily want to retire, and don't really need to, right? Mike put in his time, right? So if he wants to work 5 hours a week, great. If he wants to come in and hang out for 18 hours a week, perfect.
Sure.
Because, again, he's got so much experience that you're going to pick up on a nugget or two anytime you hang out with him, or not, and just go have a good sandwich and enjoy each other's company.
Sure.
So, when you've been Marlo and I have been together since 1990, so I think they quasi-adopted me at some point in the 90s. So when you have
you're not just the son-in-law anymore?
Yeah, at that point, you've got such a close relationship where, and it works because the relationship's so amazing, both with our whole family, right? With Mike and Joyce, with Marlo and I, with her aunt and uncle, cousins, right? It's a pretty tight-knit family that they all grew up across the street from each other, so it's kind of like a pretty classic story. And so when you walk into that, first thing that you notice is that it's pretty special.
Sure.
And you have to keep that at the forefront of anything that comes in business. And that's not to say that we didn't have our disagreements over the 23 years. We had a few epic battles, but nothing that you couldn't still go to each other's house and have dinner for. So you just have to keep it all in perspective.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's it sounds like mutual respect has been the name of the game all the way through. I mean, obviously, Mike respects your and Marlo's opinion, respects your work ethic, respects your accomplishments, and even any risks you've taken that maybe didn't pan out. But you're offering the same right back. So. Very balanced relationship there.
Yep, you just got to be super humble, and then it's fun too to watch. My in-laws, like so many folks in the winter, they go down to Florida for a few weeks here and there. They've been doing that for a long time, and still to this day, he'll come back after being down there for a week, and he'll have gone and canvassed some competition stores and give me a couple of things
A
to
little
think
bit of
about.
feedback.
I'm like, God bless.
Market intel, huh?
Yeah. So
That's
that's great.
So you talked about surrounding yourself with entrepreneurs. You had asked me the question of what do I see in terms of succession planning from people that are in business, since we serve so many different types of businesses in the company that I run. It's very interesting to see. Some people don't want to even have the conversation about a succession plan because I don't think they want to question their own mortality.
Sure.
And then others are just so exceptionally purposeful. And whether that be that they're building their organization to sell to private equity or to a larger firm, or that they have succession planning in place. And I can't say that I see one or the other, but the ones I do feel the most for are the ones that have no plan or no real end goal, and they're just going through it with horsepower and kind of ignoring the fact that at some point they will, something will force them to not be able to work, right? And so I think that when you find that right balance, you find someone like Mike who says, okay, look, it's in great hands. I'm going to kind of come and go as I please. It doesn't require me any longer. I mean, he's really built the best of all the worlds, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, when I look at our 10 to 15 year run, and that's obviously taking in a huge grain of salt that the team that we've got, right, continues to want to be there. But seems like we're on the right path with the folks that we've got in specific positions. And we're really, really fortunate that when you take Marlo and I out of that group, the average age of the people in important positions, whether it's in purchasing, whether it's in operations, and digital, I think the average age is around 34. So they've got a really nice runway ahead of them. And so we want to be considerate of that as we continue to build the company, and give them an opportunity, whether it's from a profit sharing perspective. I've seen some distributors go down the ESOP mindset or phantom equity kind of setup. And I think in distribution, it's at least from my perspective, because that's the category I'm in. Our business is 24/7. Kind of going back to the logistics background. And so, there's rarely an hour, even in the middle of the night, that goes through where we aren't getting orders in. And so, we've built a bit of a machine. And so I think if we set it up right for that generation that I just mentioned, we're extremely accommodating as well when it comes to things with time out of the office or remote work, flex work. One of my favorite things over the last couple of years that happened, we have a younger team member that's just had her second year anniversary in the fall. So Marlo and I were doing her 2-year review together, and at the end of it, I asked her, I said, hey, what else is it that we should be doing, for your generation of team members and this, that, and the other, just trying to pick her brain as to, how I'm doing in my day job. And she said, she's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, why? What? She's like, most of my friends hate their jobs. She's like, this isn't even like coming to work.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, so we're good? She's like, yeah, we're fine.
Wow.
Like, good. See you next week.
That had to be the
It was great.
The best thing you could have heard.
It was good.
That's awesome.
So, because even as much as you do with the up and coming generation, you're right there. And we've also been extremely, I don't know if the right word is proud, but impressed with our young hires, right, with their knowledge base and their interest level in terms of learning about the company. Maybe there's something to that with being in Detroit and not being automotive. And then our category is actually, it's pretty fun.
Sure.
Right? So we just attended the Michigan State Marketing Communications Career Fair, and we had over 200 applications filled out that day. It was super impressive, and Marlo and Katie that were at the event were beyond blown away by the talented young people that are graduating from Michigan State this year. Yeah,
I mean, certainly being in the Detroit area, you stand out as something different, right? You don't have you're not relying upon the automotives, you're not relying on defense, any of the other kind of typical distribution organizations that we have around here.
Right.
So yeah, you stand out quite a bit.
Yeah, for sure.
You also, I noticed, and I have Jackie here with us, pulled up on online. Saw that you've created Marlo Beauty Studios. Is that a recent creation? And can you talk about that? I know you've been highlighting it lately, but can you tell everybody a little bit about that?
Sure. So, like with many B2B trades, continued education is a big deal in our industry. And so, I think going back to like 2017, one of our larger supply partners, the Wella Company, which is a big couple, we have a number of big brands from them, including Wella, Sebastian, OPI. They've got an entire production studio in their Calabasas headquarters in California. And so because we're so ahead of the game with it as it related to e-commerce, we wanted to do the same as it came to digital education or continued education from a digital footprint. And so we partnered with Wella out at their studio to start creating a lot of educational content that we're streaming through Facebook Lives and different mediums. And then that mushroomed into doing some more of that locally here in Detroit. Well, we were renting out salons that were closed on a Sunday or a Monday. And those salon owners are smart. They knew that we needed the space, so they would charge a fair sum. And we were just fortunate that right around the corner from our two locations in Ferndale, a perfect size location became available. It's about 4,000 square feet. And so we looked at what we were spending on an annual basis renting out salons in the area. And this was a little bit more of an investment, but at the same time, we would have access to it 24/7. And so we created Marlo Beauty Studios not only to continue doing what we've been doing the last couple of years, but really, really to build on it. And it's been an absolute wonderful opportunity to engage with local stylists, local spa professionals. We've hosted a handful of events there, so it's just a nice meeting space. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier with regards to the suites. I've noticed the conversation that I've had with a number of professionals when we've hosted events there that a lot of them are in suites. So it can also be a little solitary, right? So when you're in the salon, it can be a little overkill in terms of the amount of discussion you're having, whether it's professional or not. But then once professionals transition into the suites world, that's one thing maybe that they are missing a little bit is that camaraderie and ability to.
They're a little closed off in each of their separate suites, so they don't get that camaraderie and community, huh?
Yep, and so and then also when we take on a new brand, like perfect example, we launched a new brand here in March. That's pretty well known in the Midwest, but it was new to us, and so we had two of their educator stylists come into the studio last week, Sunday and Monday. And created all kinds of really good content, both for social media and for marlobeauty.com.
Are the local folks getting to come in and actually try out some new product as well?
They can. Kind of depends on what we're doing for the event that day.
Okay.
This was primarily for content creation, but we've hosted a number of different groups over the last year since we got the studio up and running. And they like to come in and play with the products. We've got it's a full-blown working salon with a lot of technology in there as well.
Sure. Do you actually help salonists to learn how to market their businesses as well?
Yeah, but it's been interesting. I think we're constantly learning from them, right? I'm not sure that there's another trade out there that is voraciously using social media as the beauty industry is. And so, we work with a number of, I don't even know that I would call them influencers. They're just really good technologists that happen to also be salon or spa professionals. And so a lot of times when we host people at the studio, as much as we're learning from them, they're learning from us. And so it's a great way to pick up on little tidbits of, because there's 250,000 salons in the United States and several million licensed professionals. And they're great at using technology for, attaining new clients and scheduling and things of that nature. So it's been a great win-win for both sides.
Oh, that's great. Let's talk a little bit about your kind of work-life balance, because obviously you're up early, you go to bed early, very dedicated to your business, and I know you're very dedicated to your son as well. Traveling with him and with Marlo. Talk about your travels. Talk about I think if somebody was to look at you from the outside looking in, they'd say, "Oh my gosh, all that guy does is works." But I know that you enjoy a good glass of wine, you enjoy a nice trip and getaways. How do you balance things, and can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it all comes down to the technology, which just works out well that we work together. So that was not a motivational plug. And because the business does run 24/7, you have to take a step back and come up with a system, not only for yourself, but also for your team that allows that to work, in tandem with the way that the business is going to flow. And so we've done that. Our director of operations, I'm there super early. He ends up typically on an average day closing up the facility. So, and the same thing with the different people on the operations team. And the nice thing is because the business is so digital, you can be accessible, and the business can be accessible to you from anywhere on the planet. I just did a trip through the Netherlands with my son in March, which was fantastic. It was kind of like a tour of the homeland. And I contacted support to make sure that my access from IP addresses within the Netherlands were going to be able to get onto the network. And so they made that change for me for the time I was there. And so just the way that my son and I travel together, we take a little bit of a midday siesta, which was great because I was 6 hours ahead, which typically would be relatively close to when we were getting up and running here. And, I would say maybe once or twice a year I'll put the laptop and the phone away. But we've also been blessed with an amazing young team, like I mentioned, that, again, if I feel the need to de-stress, I'll go figure that out. But for the most part, my ability to leave the office and go travel or, be away is possible because of the team that's available to us, that works with us, and also with the technology backbone that we've set up to accommodate that.
Great. What are some of your favorite places to travel? I know you mentioned you were in the Netherlands, and that was great.
Well, Case and I like to go just about anywhere we've never been, so we like to pick off different places. Now, my whole family is from the Netherlands, so I've been there plenty of times. But there was plenty of places in the Netherlands that I'd never been, simply because growing up as a kid, we would always land at Schiphol Airport and go to my grandparents' house every time. And so, we've got a good program. I'm in charge of logistics and finance. He's in charge of strategy. So we come up with a game plan, and then I figure out the logistics, and I'll walk out of the Airbnb or the hotel door, and he just takes me on a tour.
Wow.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Wow, that's cool.
And Marlo likes to join us now and again, but she says we move a little too quick sometimes. So
That's great. You mentioned to me very often, you remind me that you're Dutch, and so that background, being of Dutch origin, what does that typically mean to you?
Pragmatic.
Okay.
I think it's interesting because when I moved to this country when I was 4, and I was born in France, and so I spoke a little French and I spoke a little Dutch, but I didn't speak any English. And lo and behold, both sets of my grandparents got the biggest kick out of the fact that out of all the places in the world, their kids, which are my parents, could have ended up as in West Michigan with hundreds of thousands of other Dutch people. So, which was actually, probably looking back on it was kind of comforting, just out of the fact that we got to know a lot of people that had the same background as us. So I think that pragmatism, and I think it really was interesting in this trip for Casey and I to go see some of the things that are very, very, very typical Dutch in terms of building out the dike systems, and you look at the history of the way that the Netherlands has developed over centuries. It's absolutely fascinating. And so you can just see that shines through with that nationality of just being extremely pragmatic.
Interesting. You also mentioned, kind of who you surround yourself with. Obviously, we hear people tell us, we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. I came to meet you through a common friend, Jason Napolitano. Was introduced also to Bill Grzynia, another friend of yours. Heath, some other folks, Ryan Fogelberg. All of these guys, really solid people, all very successful. Can you talk to me about, how you think you gravitated towards that group at Michigan State is where you met most of these guys, I believe?
Yeah, and I think also I'd say about half of them were from undergrad, and then the other half were just by getting to know other very smart, capable people. Being here in Metro Detroit, and because I was European, grew up in West Michigan, I didn't really have any heartstrings attached to Detroit. So when Detroit was going through a little bit of its challenges, let's say from the 2000 to 2010, and you travel nationally, and people are like, oh, you're from Detroit, it's too bad. I'm like, yeah, you should visit it sometime. You'd be surprised. And I was always surprised, like the level of talent and the brain trust that's in Metro Detroit. So when you're at an event or you're at a dinner party and you meet somebody of a specific skill set, or that's a CEO of a multi-$100 million dollar company, you should pay attention.
Sure.
That person could probably teach you something.
Absolutely.
And I think because we're in such a different business at Marlo Beauty than exists in Metro Detroit, I always took it as an opportunity to learn from others. What Bill was focusing his time and energy on. The challenges that Heath maybe is having because he's another family-owned business person, fourth generation, right? So, and vice versa, right? I think that as much as I gained from them, they've come in to visit our business as well. And so, I think that's the one thing as small to medium-sized business owners and managers, you don't typically have corporate development programs. So you got to build one yourself, and a lot of times that's done through, just good networking.
Sure. Are there any other networks that you're involved in, Entrepreneurs Organization or Vistage or anywhere else that you've kind of sought out for those?
I'm not. I think at my, we had kind of interesting chapters during the last 15 years, probably starting really with divesting the store division. And then, we had a pretty good run up until, prepping the business to be e-com before COVID. And there's never a great time, right, to take that time out and join one of those organizations. But I think for myself, maybe sometimes the windows of opportunity just kind of missed based on where we were at with our business and family life, which is probably one thing that I would look forward to I would, for younger people on our team, would highly suggest if the business continues to scale. Just because I've had so many friends, including yourself, that have been involved in some of these organizations, and it's just such a nice opportunity to learn even more. I'm fortunate, whether it's Vistage, whether it's YPO, EO, I've got friends that are in all those organizations. And so, on occasion, if I do feel like I need to pick somebody's brain about something, there's a pretty good network to choose from.
Sure. Have you leveraged any of the other? I mean, let me back up and say this a slightly different way. Is there a book or a coach of sorts? Even if it's somebody that you've never met, maybe you've just read their book that you really say, wow, that person has influenced me, or that system has influenced me, that you'd make remark of?
Yeah, I mean, I think my wife and son crack up that as much as I watch sports. But I really watch sports more from the coaching perspective. I'm always fascinated how, one person can take over a team and completely, change the culture. And I think that to a large degree, as we were going through the changes that we were going through with changing the nature of our company, I depended on a lot of examples like that in order to be able to take a company that was, done business one way for 25 years, and I was going to go completely get turned on its head.
Yeah.
I look at a lot of like the coaches that have come from different sports. And then obviously, right, there's no shortage of unbelievable entrepreneurs that have come around the last 15, 20 years, primarily from the tech sector, whether it's the folks from PayPal, whether it's the folks from Stripe, Amazon. I mean, the list is just endless. So there's just a treasure trove of great articles to read about people, running different parts of those amazing businesses to learn from.
And you read a lot?
I read a lot of articles. I don't know if I don't have quite have the attention span for a book. I'm working on that.
Yeah, me too. I'm big into summaries, book summaries, and articles. That's where I get most of mine. My ADHD doesn't allow me to finish too many books.
And I love a good long drive so I can flip on a handful of podcasts.
Same.
How we built this, or those different business business background podcasts that I think are fantastic.
Yeah, they're great. Well, hopefully we'll build this to be
Right.
that as well. So, well, thanks for your time here. We appreciate you being here. I mean, I appreciate you being the first guest of the podcast.
No, it's been great. I think I think you guys are onto something here, and I think when I look at what you guys have built at Oxium, and they're such an important partner of ours, again because IT and e-commerce are hand in hand together. I think you guys are going to have a nice runway with the podcast, and I know just based on your diverse client base, should be make for some great episodes.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we actually so this episode is sponsored. All episodes will be sponsored by Oxium, but this episode also is actually being sponsored by Juniper Networks as
Nice.
well. So that was really nice of them to join the mix.
Excellent. Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you, Ingmar Korstanje from Marlo Beauty Supply. Thanks
Take
for
care.
being here.